So just about a week and a half, 2 weeks after, maybe it's 2.5 weeks after George Floyd's death, we have massive protests. The entire country lights up. Cities are shut down. And last week, another police shooting happens at a Wendy's in Georgia, shooting an unarmed man in the back. It's almost too much to believe. Like, does anything change? There's two sides to every story, and there's two sides to every debate. But are we going to move forward? Are we going to grow? Are our attention spans, everybody's putting their little checkered squares on their Instagram? That's great. Headed out to a protest, that's great. But the media cycle moves on. People's attention move on. Is anything going to change? And meanwhile, we have a debate over people saying Black Lives Matter. We still got that debate going on, like people saying all lives matter. No, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. Seriously. Are we kids in a schoolyard? We either come together or we fall apart. Let's talk about it. I'm Rob Nelson. This is Rob Nelson Live.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there.
My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News, but news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake.
You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
All right, everybody, welcome back. I'm Rob Nelson. This is Rob Nelson Live. We got an interactive Wednesday show. I do a monologue, call it a rant, call it what you want. Bruce jumps in periodically and keeps me on track. And we got callers who show up. And Bruce is the man. He's like the Wizard of Oz. Put yourself back up there, Bruce. Bruce is like the Wizard of Oz. He's like behind the curtain. He always has a tie on. You know, we'll be out in these rallies, and we'll talk about that. I went to the Sunday to the biggest rally we've had in Hollywood, 10,000 people. And I call it the Black Lives Matter or Gay Pride meets Black Lives Matter March. And by the way, and Bruce, sidebar, we're going to have the guy who organized that rally on, Paul Scott, on Friday. But Bruce is, I'm out there like with 10,000 people, like in the crowds and whatever. I got my mask on, trying to stay safe. Bruce is like sitting in his little corner there with his tie on, directing traffic. It's like we're literally in two different worlds, but it's fun, right, Bruce?
Wouldn't have it any other way, especially when I have to call and say, hey, head down to Sepulveda and downtown, and we're just running down to just have you meet 200, 300 cops as they drive right by you.
Right. One of these days, though, you're coming out there with me. I'm going to throw you into the mosh pit of humanity, you know? And
totally down.
You can experience it close up instead of back there. So the Wizard of Oz is going to pull all the strings back here behind the scenes. Again, this is our call-in show. So you can call in, you can text in. Next week, we're hoping, and then we'll get to it in a second. Next week, we're going to hopefully have we're going to try to put together a little roundtable where we have like a bunch of people on at once. That's our plan. But for today, we got a lot going on. And I want to start because I did go to the biggest rally, the 10,000 person march in Hollywood, which was radically different than the others. And I want to start my monologue rant right there. So let's get to it. So, okay. You know, I've been at a lot of these protests, and some of you have too in your cities and where you're from, and some of you haven't. Some of you have been watching from the safety of your homes. Nothing wrong with that. People make a choice. They want to go out. Do they not want to go out? But this rally was markedly different. One, it was pulled off in a very short amount of time. So for those of you who don't know, every year, Gay Pride has a day that's Gay Pride Day, and Los Angeles has probably the biggest Gay Pride rally in the country. It's a party. It's a march, but it's a party, and it starts in West Hollywood, the heart of gay Hollywood, gay Los Angeles, and moves east. And it's like I said, if you live in LA, it's the biggest. It's like Halloween but bigger. It's a gigantic party, and it's happy and it's festive. This year they decided, hey, let's bring it together with Black Lives Matter. Now, there was some politics underneath it and the whole deal, but at the end of the day, a small group of people, and one of them was Paul Scott, who, like I said, is going to be on our show Friday, organized a march. And instead, they started in the heart of Hollywood, iconic Hollywood and Highland, where the Oscars are, where the El Capitan is, where Jimmy Kimmel does his show, the famous Chinese Man Theater, and they marched toward West Hollywood. And it was around 10,000 people. And it was the most incredibly, there were no police. There was a few along the way, but basically I was in a crowd of 5,000 people and there wasn't a police officer in sight. It was 100% peaceful and it was even joyous. It's not that people weren't out there to protest, but they were out there to protest with a sense of joy. And it had a markedly different feel than other protests that I've gone to. But I talked to a lot of people in that rally. And one of the things that kept coming up was, and if you've been watching the news, we are in a cultural, people are saying we're having a cultural civil war, and we may be. We are in this weird divide where, you know, it's almost like coronavirus created two camps. Well, this Black Lives Matter movement has created two camps too. It's odd. You wouldn't think there'd be an opposing camp. And it's not so much that they say we oppose Black Lives Matter. It's that they frame it as like, well, qualifying. Yeah, again, I'm not saying qualifying. We'll get to the looting and all that stuff again, because I had some interesting conversations with people about that. But qualifying that whether this problem is as bad as people say it is. And again, if you are a Black person, you're saying, hey, it is. And a lot of white people and Latino people and Asian people are saying it is that bad, especially for Black people. But a lot of white people have had resistance. And then another group of white people has said, no, we 100% support you. But I'm going to call a lot of those the like kind of the like wannabe good liberals. Like they'll do and say whatever they're supposed to do and say to like support the cause. And they'll put BLM all over their stuff and they'll criticize you for your white privilege and they'll own their white privilege and apologize for it. But are they really going to make change? I mean, are they even going to make the fundamental mental change? You know, are they going to stop crossing the street when they see a big Black guy walking down the street? I talk to people on the street about that. And I've talked to people I've coached about that. And the number of times you ask any, you know, tall Black guy, what happens when he walks down the street in the evening or the night? And they will almost to a person tell you they watch white people look weird, cross, move aside, go to the other side. They don't know who the person is. They're just projecting fear. Like that person hasn't emanated. I'm not saying you couldn't have a person walking down the street who's threatening you, some gangbanger coming down the street, but they just look at the way the person is, base it somewhat on the way they're dressed, but maybe even not that, and move aside. It's like so many white people I know, when they talk about Black people, they lower their voice when they say the word Black. It's like, you know, so I was in this restaurant and there were these Black people. It's like, why'd your voice drop? Like it's built in this subconscious discomfort that prevents people from being willing to talk about it, to get into it. And the more we create this divide, the more afraid people are to say anything wrong. We've got running up in this is the massive, massive cancel culture, in which if you say the wrong thing, even well-intentioned, you will get canceled and you will be shut down and you must apologize, and you must apologize for being so stupid to say it in the first place. And even if it was a while ago, you have to go back and say, you're sorry you were stupid then and you want to be re-educated now. So we're in a divide when we need to start coming together. And I get divides can happen sometimes to pull us together, but we're still on two sides of this. So I want to play a clip that came out of the rally. This is the Hollywood rally. And you'll see just how many people there are. I'm up on a wall above them when someone starts a chant. So Bruce, can we play that clip?
The march is moving, thousands of people. If I fall into this mess, I'm falling into a mosh pit of people, but it's intense. What do you got to say, everybody? What do you got to say, huh? Yeah. Do you notice there are no police here and there is no violence? It's peaceful, right? Black Lives Matter today? Black Lives Matter! 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 Now we got a song going, everybody. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! All 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 Black Lives Matter! Hey, you're small, but you have a huge voice. That was awesome.
All right, so there's fun in that, but I play it for a purpose. I think a lot of white people watch that and can get tense at how angry she seems and wound up. And yet she's not angry, as in a sense, she's compassionate. But we see that as anger. We project anger onto it. And so when I lean over and say, you're small but have a big voice, she smiled, beams up at me, thank you. That's what I'm talking about, where we're uncomfortable. So many white people are uncomfortable. Like, you can't say something. Like, I could see white people cringing. He did not just lean down and say, she's so little. But she's tiny. She was like 4'10". And she had just screaming out and leaping up. It was so inspiring. She had the whole crowd going, better than the people with the megaphones. So why wouldn't I point that out? Why wouldn't I say that? But more importantly, why wouldn't I connect and interact with her as a human being? And why are we having such a hard time, so many of us, seeing what it means to be a Black person in America? Why are we cutting and parsing facts, nailing out statistics? So many Black people tell me, you can't know what it's like to be a Black person. The march on Sunday was all Black Lives Matter, which was a tie-in to the LGBTQ thing, but also her thing, all Black Lives Matter. And I want to talk for a minute about the resistance to, when people say Black Lives Matter, say Black Lives Matter, and someone goes, well, all lives matter. And I just got to say, and I'm not a super partisan person, and anybody who knows me knows I don't jump on bandwagons easily, and I don't like to say things to just be PC, but it's like, which part don't people get? Of course, all lives matter. But when people are saying Black Lives Matter, they're essentially saying, hey, we don't feel Black lives have mattered. Black lives matter too. So you don't have to say all lives matter. That's a given. But Black lives matter. And we feel Black lives haven't mattered. And Sunday, people were saying all Black lives matter. Why do we have to qualify? But no, all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter. That's not a question. Why is it hard for so many white people to say, Black lives have not mattered as much? Oh, no, but you say they have. No, they haven't. They really haven't. And if you've worked in an inner city community, if you've lived in an integrated community, if you've known Black people who were rich or Black people who were poor, Black people who were educated or Black people who were gangbangers, you have heard the same thing over and over. We don't get treated the same, especially when it comes to law enforcement. So before anybody throws out statistics or says anything at all about the numbers, I just want you to put the stats aside and think about the people. Tim Scott, who is a Republican senator, said a couple of years ago, and it went viral the other day, said, I have so many instances in my life of being stopped by cops. Sometimes, he said, I was speeding, but most of the time I was just driving too nice a car in the wrong neighborhood. He got asked to show his credentials to walk into the Senate. That never happens. He's wearing a senator's pin. If you've worked in Washington, that pin is your pass-through. He got stopped and asked to show them. He said the number of times in my life, I am an educated Black man. I am a U.S. senator, and I get it. Years ago, Jesse Jackson Jr.'s son had the same experience. I know so many well-off, powerful, educated Black people who have had a discriminatory treatment by the police. It's not just about they were doing something wrong. And Senator Lindsey Graham, also an ultra-conservative from the South and white as white can be, came out yesterday and said, I support what Tim Scott said. Which part don't you get, that I get treated differently by cops than Black people do? If you are white, you do not know what it's like to be Black and driving in a car. And if you ask anybody, anyone would rather be white and driving in a car. I know Black people who will say, if I'm with a white person in the car, it makes it safer. I don't know why. I'm not saying all cops are racist. I think there's a systemic bias built in. I'm not saying crime rates don't affect whether you're scared and more likely to think something. You can think anything you want. But the reality is, for most Black people in America, they feel a certain different look when it comes to the police. As Lindsey Graham put it, I'm driving, I get pulled over by the cops. I'm thinking about how I can talk my way out of the ticket. I ain't thinking, are they going to shoot me? I'm a white guy. I've had encounters with cops that they were using a sense of aggressive force and authority against me that felt completely unnecessary. And I'm white. And I've talked my way out of situations. I know that I don't get treated the same as a black guy. So at a minimum, why are we stuck on this first point? Forget about the police reforms, on this simple point of acknowledging that black people have not been treated the same. We enslaved black people. I mean, don't be like that was a long time ago. I mean, we had Jim Crow laws. Clearly, black people have not historically been treated the same as white people. And today there's still a systemic racism and bias out there. The news media still doesn't cover the inner city black on black violence the way it covers a shooting of a bunch of white people. 10 white people get shot in a shopping mall. It's national news for 2 weeks. 40 people get shot in Chicago every other weekend. It barely makes the news because it's black people shooting black people. There is a devaluing of black people's lives in America at some level, whether you personally do it or not. And it's certainly there is a bias that comes into police enforcement. Now, I want to talk about police enforcement, and I want to set this up because on the other side of this coin, I think there are a lot of well-intentioned people trying really hard to do the right thing and say the right thing. And we've created a cancel culture where you get shut down if you don't say it the right way. And I talked about last week, Drew Brees said, I don't support kneeling in front of the flag, but I totally support Black Lives Matter and all my black friends and teammates. And he had to take it back. Like, it wasn't even okay to say, I don't support kneeling in front of the flag. I support your protests and I support what you're about, but I think the flag is different because it's people who died in service for our country. Couldn't say it. A company called Motorskate in, I believe it's Michigan, posted a Instagram in which they had a Venn diagram. You know, that's where you have the circles that come together, overlap, and the center is where they overlap. And it said, you can be all three of these. You can be outraged by George Floyd's death. You can be unhappy and disappointed that there was looting. And you can believe there are good police officers who are trying to do the right thing. And you are in the middle, me. And then they had a tag about how, you know, we all need unity and justice. And it offended them that they still have to say Black Lives Matter. Like, we, not like, why do I have to say it? Like, how are we still at a point where we haven't actually gotten to where that's not true, that we would have to actually point that out? So they were 100% supportive. And they got thousands, hundreds and hundreds of people saying, we'll never use your skate products, blowing them up, calling them racist, saying their companies should go under. How could they once again qualifying? And I was like, wait a minute. These people meant well. And they weren't undermining Black Lives Matter. And for a second, they were very clear, Black Lives Matter, and we'll say it loud and clear, there's been injustice. But they were saying you could be upset that George Floyd was murdered. And I use the word murder because it was murder. You could be disappointed that there was a looting, that you don't feel that looting and violence helps the protests. And you could believe there are many good police officers trying to do the right thing, and we should support that. You could be all three of those things. But so many people in social media blew them up. They took it down, apologized, said they were ignorant. I hate that. They were ignorant and needed to be reeducated. I've talked to more people, Black people, who say it's fine to be all three of those things. That's not the problem. Bruce, can we play clip 2?
But, like, how do you guys feel the last few weeks? Like, do you feel like there's some hopefulness coming out of this? Or not really? Not yet.
Not yet. There's a lot of work that still needs to be
And there's
done.
a lot of people holding up signs and putting black squares on, and I'm the first to say, like, hey, black squares are fine. That ain't going to change the world. Like, institutional change doesn't happen because you put it on
It starts with
Instagram.
legislation. It starts with voting. It starts with making your voice heard.
That's right. Demonstration is powerful, and they can make a statement and kind of push, you know, the narrative. But if we don't have change in our government, in our legislation, in our city council, like, then everything that we're doing will kind of be in vain. It goes hand in hand. It's a powerful balance to have.
What do you say when people say, you know, and people have had this debate the last few days, and it comes from more white people. They say, I'm outraged by George Floyd's murder, you know, completely outraged. I do support cops who are good cops, not all cops, but good cops, and I don't like when people are rioting or looting buildings and stuff like that. What's your response to that? Because I've gotten different responses from different people about that.
I feel as if...
Can you say all those things, or does that mean you're not getting it?
You can say all those things. I mean, I have family members who are cops. Of course, we support good cops and cops that don't use excessive force and try everything in their power not to harm an individual.
Right.
Guys, that African Americans, they need attention, and that we're being killed at alarming rates. And when you say all lives matter, you're saying that African Americans don't need attention right now, and we need a little more attention right now.
So again, and I had many people say the same thing. So there's 2 points here. One is we need to be really careful of the social media backlash, because it's making people feel like they can't say anything, even if they're well-intentioned, and that will silence well-intentioned, good voices. People may not always get it right the first time, but they want to learn how to get it right. And you don't help people understand or get things right by simply silencing them because they said it the wrong way. And there are plenty of Black people out there, and plenty of Latinos out there, and plenty of Asians, and plenty of white people out there who all think you can be all three of those things. The problem becomes when people feel you are trying to dismiss what she said at the end, the all Black Lives Matter part, that if you are trying to marginalize that and not acknowledge Black people have been historically and currently discriminated against in a lot of ways, and especially when it comes to our policing and our policing systems in most cities and communities across America. That does not mean all cops are bad cops. It means we have a systemic problem. So before we get interaction and people in here, I want to talk about that because I think this is a big, big, big one for people. The issue of police force. We saw what happened to George Floyd. And you can argue about George Floyd's background, this, it doesn't matter. George Floyd handed a counterfeit bill over. He resisted arrest. And he ended up dying because someone kneeled on his neck for 8 minutes. Just last week, you'd think after all this happened, every cop in America is going to be on their extra best behavior. If not, just because they don't want to go to jail for murder. And a guy's drunk, sleeping in a Wendy's. The cops talk to him for 40 minutes, give him a sobriety test, decide to take him in. He resists arrest. He struggles. He grabs one of the cops' tasers and he runs away. And as he's running, he points the taser over his shoulder, and the cop pulls out a gun and shoots him twice in the back and kills him. Both of these issues, both of these cases have led some people to say, hey, and I've had a conversation, I don't know if he'll come on, with a very good friend of mine about it. And he's a very well-intentioned and very smart, thoughtful conservative. He is trying to see the right thing, but say, well, and I've heard this from many people, what if you just didn't resist arrest? What if they didn't resist arrest? None of this would happen. It wouldn't happen if they didn't break the law to start with. And if they didn't break the law and resist arrest, none of this would happen. That's not the point. The point isn't that if you just comply with the police, nothing bad will happen. First of all, that's not always true. Remember the cases of people like in their cars, like reaching to get somebody out of the glove compartment to show them the guy, show the ID, and he gets shot. He had a license gun in the thing. It's like, I'm gonna show you my ID and I have a gun in there, gets shot. Sometimes complying will get you shot. And if you are a Black person, you might be very scared what will happen if you comply. You might be afraid that if you are lying on the ground, you won't get back up. But beyond that, the police don't have an authoritative right to make me do whatever they want. And people go, yes, they do. They're the police. Well, who turned the police into the Gestapo? Who made our police, I don't want Stalin, and Mussolini's fascism. I don't want cops who are like, as long as you do what we tell you, everything will be fine. The police are paid by us to enforce laws. And yes, they have a right to apprehend you. And yes, they technically have a right to arrest you, but we give them enormous power. We give them the power to pull you over, get you out of your car, put you on the ground, put handcuffs on you. They have enormous power to make us do what they want. And if they have that power, they do not have the right to kill me because I resist it. They have a right to lock me up if they want under the law for me resisting, but you don't have a right to kill me. You have the only time you have a right to kill me is if I am threatening you with mortal danger or someone else with mortal danger. It's that simple. If I cannot or am not about to kill you, you cannot kill me to prevent me from some future act I might do or to stop me or whatever. A guy pointing a taser at you over his shoulder, running away drunk, is not going to kill you. If he even hits you, he's not going to kill you. He might stun you. He is not going to kill you. And I've seen too many cops who it's their ego and their power. I told you to do it, you do it. Well, I didn't make the cops. We didn't make the cops the all being authority who has a gun and a badge and can order us to do whatever they want. And if we resist, it's our fault. And we may pay the ultimate price. Should have complied. No. You have a right to not comply, and they can arrest you and they can restrain you and they can take you in, but they can't kill you. And we need to get that real straight. You don't get to kill people unless they're threatening your life. George Floyd wasn't threatening anybody's life. The guy at the Wendy's was not threatening anyone's life. He was running away drunk with a stun gun, a taser, which, by the way, police used tasers on the crowds in the protests. So they clearly didn't think they were deadly weapons. Let's leave aside the hypocrisy, which we'll get to in a second, because both sides claim tasers are deadly weapons when they want to, right? The protesters claimed the tasers were deadly weapons, and cops got actually relieved from duty and taken off the force for using them in protests, saying they weren't deadly weapons. Now, the cop shoots a guy in Atlanta. The cops say it was a deadly weapon. He had our taser. He was going to shoot us. And the protesters are saying wasn't a deadly weapon. So the hypocrisy and all that is certainly a part of the problem. That both sides switch the facts as they want them to be. But the truth is, a taser is not a deadly weapon in most instances. And a guy running drunk with a taser pointing it over his shoulder is not going to kill you. And that cop didn't shoot him because he thought he was going to die. Cops shot him because he was pissed that he had his taser and was running away with it. I'm sorry. I don't need to be inside the guy's head to figure that out. You know when you're going to die. You know when your life is at stake. And if it's not, you don't get to use a gun. So what's the solution? Is it perhaps that we have cops have less guns? Some cops don't get guns. We have a force in the police department thinks they have guns, and most cops don't have them. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe the only way you restrain deadly force from happening, maybe you can't count on people's judgment. Maybe it's training. Maybe you can train people, but training takes time. And we have really short attention spans. So I want to wrap this up with the kind of where do we go from here? Because we do have short attention spans, right? Without COVID, this never would have happened. We never would have had the protests without COVID. I don't care how many black people got shot. COVID, people were locked up so crazy, ready to go. They jumped out when they could and they hit the streets. Woo! I'm out. I can protest. I'll be in. I'm in. I'm serious. I'm smiling, but COVID made this possible. Our attention spans are short. People are already getting tired of it. They want new things. They want to move on. The media is already starting to move on. The media is a very fickle thing. It's like that person who falls in love real fast and tells everybody, I'm madly in love, I'm going to get married. And then 3 weeks later, a month later, they're out of the relationship. And they're in another one 2 weeks later. You sort of stop believing them. You're like, okay, whatever. You make everything so whatever. It's not. The person who always exaggerates everything. And you finally just stop taking them seriously. That's the media. I'm not saying these weren't real problems. COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm saying the media gets hyped on something and makes it the only thing that matters for a few weeks. And then it moves on. COVID lasted a long time. Black Lives Matter and the protests has lasted a few weeks. But they all move on. And everybody posting your black squares and raising your fist and chanting yes and calling out white privilege and saying you're sorry for yours and be sorry for, I should be sorry for mine, will move on too. So how do we get real change, especially in a climate where there's double standards? Like I said, the double standards are ridiculous. We thought COVID had double standards. I just used the example of the tasers, like the double standard around, people choosing to use what facts they want when they want. And at a certain point, and also the double standard even around the protests, right? Remember, like almost every big city politician and most of the media was fine with thousands and thousands of people going out to protest. There was no social distancing. Trust me. I was in those crowds. People did have masks, not everyone, but most, but you were jammed up against people tighter than you'd be in any situation I can imagine being in, tighter than a concert, tighter than a sporting event, tighter than any beach you're on. Thousands of people mashed up against each other all over America. And hundreds of cops and military, thousands, all those people going home. And the media made very little about how that was going to create a massive COVID spread. But, Donald Trump holding a rally next week, it's the end of the world. That double standard people see through. So we either kind of come together, like I said, or we come apart. And coming together won't happen by just insisting the other side just agree to everything you say, or just censoring anybody who doesn't get it right. It also won't come together by, insisting on an absolute extreme outcome that will never happen. Defund all police departments, get rid of all police departments. Nor will it happen by the other side just consistently arguing you're making too much out of the problem. We got to find a common ground. All right, let's bring some thoughts and comments in here. What do we got, Bruce? Can you read it for me? You know me and the glasses.
Yeah, I know you in the glasses. Okay, so Cubecast asks also, would you be able to make the correct choice 100% of the time in the heat of the moment in a high-stress situation?
I think that's a really fair question. And I think the answer is probably, I don't know, perhaps not. I had a situation where I walked out of a bar a number of years ago in Koreatown. And we were all I was walking out with a friend who was an ER doctor. We're both white. And most of the people in the bar were white or Asian. And there was a SWAT team on the street. And we walked out into a SWAT team. And I walked into a young cop whose rifle was pointed literally 2 feet from my head, yelling at me, put your hands up, drop the bags, put your hands up. And I just froze. And I looked at him. My buddy dropped his bag. And I'm like, dude, put the gun down. He's like, hands shaking. He's like, put your hands up. Put your hands up. I'm like, I'm going to put my hands up. I'm moving slow. Just put the gun down because I don't want you to shoot me in the head. I don't know why I got a rifle pointed in my head right now. I just walked out of a bar. Eventually, I put my hands up, and then they handcuffed me and left me on the ground for an hour, sort of in a retaliatory thing. I know what it's like to have retaliation, but I was like, why are you pointing a gun in my head? Now, it turned out there'd been a threat called into the bar, a gun threat. Nobody knew in the bar, and there was no gun. So I get that cops are under extreme pressure, and the sergeant later came and talked to me about it and said, these guys, it's a lot of pressure. I don't know if I'd make the right call or if most people could. I do know that police have a sense of authority that they get away with because they have they have qualified immunity, so they up until now won't get punished for it. And they use excessive force when they don't have to. And I've experienced it in my own life with cops using force they didn't need to use. So maybe the answer is they need to have different kinds of training. Maybe it is they need to not have as many guns. But it's, again, you have to put the question to yourself. Like, if you had a gun and just shot people because you felt a little threatened, you'd go to jail. So they don't have an unqualified right to just kill people because they're angry or upset at the resistance. What else we got, Bruce? We got Igor waiting to jump on a call with us.
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring him in. Hey, Igor. We also have Felice with us.
Igor. Oh, wait.
Yep, Igor, you're on mute, by the way.
Okay, sorry.
Cube.
I wonder if the United
Yeah, I'll bring it up. Go ahead, Igor.
Cube.
Okay, I wonder if the US culture is still formed by different groups that
so he's not
do
able
not
to
mix with.
Rob,
Sorry.
you're breaking up.
Can you hear me?
You got me
Yep,
now?
go ahead. Yep,
Yeah,
you're good.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I wonder if the United States culture is still formed by different groups that do not mix with each other, that do not go together to parties or to have fun together. So what I mean is, like, we have different groups, Latinos, Hispanics, whites, black, that have their own way to live, and we did not create yet a way to mix each other. So I would like to know if
So wait,
we need to.
So what are you saying? You're saying you wonder if our culturally we're too divided to come together because we each live in our tribal ways?
Yeah, that we need to create that kind of melting pot, a truly melting pot. We need to learn how to live with each other. We're all Americans.
Why do you see? This is the thing when people talk about the melting pot. Why do we think we have to all melt together? I get why we're all Americans, and I get why people go, I'm American first, and we come together, and we historically have all found ways to be American. But why does that mean you can't celebrate your differences? And why does it also mean you can't politically and socially have those differences? I mean, we clearly haven't, throughout our history, made African Americans and, most Black Americans weren't made part of the melting pot. They were an other for a long time. I mean, I know people like to say slavery, whatever. We had Jim Crow laws into the 50s. In the 60s, we started the late 60s. We had massive discrimination into the 70s. It may be more systemic now, but I mean, I don't think we've incorporated other people in. And again, why do we have to, Igor? Why do we have to all be the same? Why can't you be American and still have your differences? Do you think that's a tribal thing that will just keep us apart?
Because I think if we learn how to live together, we are going to create a more rich culture, and we'll have less violence, and we'll be like more happy with less prejudice in the United States.
What's your background?
My background?
What's your ethnic background?
Yeah, I'm originally Brazilian.
Yeah. You're Brazilian?
Yes.
Okay. So, and Brazil obviously has, you have a lot of dark-skinned Brazilians and lighter-skinned Brazilians, right? But you don't have the same racial issue that we had around black and white, even though there's a lot of Brazilians who are very dark-skinned and would look as black as any black American, right?
Yeah,
it's a different culture, right?
Yeah, everyone is kind of mixed.
Right. But I think that comes from our politics. But how do you, as a Brazilian, do you think of yourself more as a white person or as a Latino person? How do you position yourself?
I think it's complicated to say. Here, I think here in the United States, I feel myself more like I'm a black person.
More like a black person.
In Brazil, more white.
In Brazil, that's really interesting. But that may just go to show it's partly where we are. Thanks for the comments, Igor. Appreciate it. But that's an interesting point he makes, everybody. And look, we're running out of time. I mean, we're wrapping this up, but we'll try to get another comment if we can. But in America, he feels more white, in Brazil more black. In America more black, and Brazil more white. And that's really interesting. And it does go to show you it's kind of where we are, how we are, who we are, where we grew up, what we do, all affects that. But the biggest issue, I think, the biggest challenge we have, you guys, is we have to find a coming together. And that coming together doesn't come by coercing one side or the other into your camp. So on the one hand, a coming together won't happen by making all white people acknowledge their privilege and say they're sorry and ask to be reeducated. You can do it. It's just ultimately people won't create change. And you'll create a backlash of resistance of people who are going, you know what? No, you're creating what Candace Owens calls a silent majority, who are like, I do support what you're about, but I'm doing my best and I'll keep learning to do better. But you can't make me feel like I have to apologize for every wrong thought or thing I say. That won't get us there. But neither will the other side, which is like, hey, you guys are fine. Stop saying stop bringing up the past. Black people are doing great for the most part. It's your own fault if you're not. And, all lives matter. And, looking past it, because you're, again, not understanding where the other side's coming from and a perspective. You can't have the perspective of a black person if you haven't been a black person. I don't care if you know black people. I don't care if you're married to black people. Then you know the perspective of your friends who are black and the person you're married to, but you don't know what it's like to be a black person any more than a black person doesn't really know what it's like to be a white person. Or a guy doesn't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I have tons of women friends. I don't actually know what it's like to be a woman. And until we get to the point where we can go, I can't honestly know what it's like to be in your shoes, but I get it. If enough of you, at a certain point, listen to the voices. When Tim Scott is saying, I'm a U.S. Senator and I've dealt with police harassment or being mistreated or pulled over unnecessarily just for driving in the wrong neighborhood in a nice car. If you go out, you will find most black people have some experience with that. That doesn't make all cops bad. But if you can't recognize that it's not just a bunch of people making something up, that an entire group, a minority, but a big minority, a group of Americans feels that they have a consistent problem with being discriminated against. And if you doubt what I'm saying, then check your own, forget your white privilege, check your prejudice meter. Do you look twice when you see a big black guy walking down the street? Do you think twice? Do you move to the other side of the street? Do you think about moving to the other side of the street? Do you put your eyes down? Do you get tense? Do you lower your voice when you say the word black? Are you comfortable going up to a black person and having an honest conversation about race? I'll bet you're not, but you feel somehow like you'd be saying, so why do you feel anxious about it? You got your own built-in prejudices. So, it's okay. But if you want to get past those prejudices, then you got to at least try to understand that they're coming from the fact that you don't know what it's like to be them. And there is a difference. And we're not going to bridge that gap by making it all go away and saying, let's just all be American. We're going to bridge it by figuring out how to solve the problems. And one of them is going to take real reform in our police departments. That doesn't mean defunding them, but that means training. George Gascon, the candidate for DA for LA, came on our show on Friday and said, he was ahead of the San Fran Police Department, number 2 in the LAPD. Said, look, it comes from the top down. It's how we train people. It's our leadership. We've got to change the culture. Well, instead of fighting it, maybe get on board with changing the culture. That doesn't mean not supporting police officers. And the other side that says all police officers are bad, that's ridiculous. You saw people saying that. Many have said it to me. No, it's good police officers. That police officer in my family. But we don't get anywhere. If we create an ongoing cultural war, we will just create 2 divisive camps that will keep dividing, and we'll keep having more conflict and more destruction, and we will all lose. We will all fall apart if we don't come together. I'm Rob Nelson. Oh, I'm done, Bruce. I'm done.
We have a call in, and we had someone who just was agreeing with what you just said, Cubecast. Let me put it on screen real quick.
Okay.
Why do we need to come together? At what point do we just call it water and oil when we just won't mix? Why try? Left and right seems so far apart. Would it not be better to just have 2 systems draw a line in the sand?
Oh, see now, okay, and I'm going to end it on this, Bruce. Is that all right? On this note?
Well, we do have that. We do have the call-in who's also with us waiting too.
Okay. Well, all right. Bring the call in. We'll go a little long.
Sure. There you go. Hey, Felice.
Hi. What you got to say?
Can you hear me? Hey, Rob.
Yep.
Great job, by the way. I just wanted to share this real quick. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Is that I think a lot of what you're saying is very well said. And just in my experience in reporting on downtown La Mesa and the people that I've talked to from all different backgrounds. And to be fair, I was getting some pretty devastating looks from certain protesters and whatnot, I'm sure because the color of my skin at the time. But I did make a conscious effort to just comment on people walking by. Oh, what a beautiful kid you have. Like, how old? Doesn't even have to be about anything else other than like focusing on just getting to know each other on some other level and just open those doors of communication where if we start kind of getting to know someone we wouldn't normally, we can start to understand their perspective and just like kind of bridge the gap that way.
Right. But let me ask you something. What's your name?
Felice.
Luis?
Felice.
Elise. So 2 quick questions. One, when you said I was getting looks for being white, did you, and be honest.
I mean, I would assume that's what they were.
No, I know, but be honest. Do you, and again, I know no one wants to admit to this, but when you see black people, do you have a different censor? Not that you think they're bad people, but a tension or an anxiety. Oh, if I say the wrong thing, or it could be the black guy walking down the street as a white woman. Do you have some of that? And I know it's not malicious if you have it, but do you experience that when you see that?
Definitely. I'm very afraid to say the wrong thing. 1,000%. And that doesn't pertain to just that situation, but I think that would be fair to say.
Right.
Am I proud of it? I don't think so. I don't know.
Right. So I want you to think about it because, again, and the reason I'm pointing it out is because I go in these crowds all the time and I don't get strange looks from black people.
Okay.
I'm white as you get. You can leave her on screen, Bruce. I don't get strange looks from black people, at least. But I'm not uncomfortable with what to say. I don't need to say you look, your kid is beautiful. I'll make a direct comment because I think part of the problem white people have is we avoid the race issue. Every black person in America knows the first thing people see when they look at them is that they're black. And if you ask a black person that, they won't hesitate to say, of course they know that. Same way people notice you're a woman right away and a white woman. So I think part of our discomfort is what creates the tension. We're so careful, instead of just being honest. You know, my point out, if you saw the video of the young woman yelling and screaming, you know, a lot of white people would have hesitated to say, "You're so little."
Right.
She was tiny.
That's
and she
true.
stood up and was like, "Thank you," like smile, like she got it. Like I was like, "You're a tiny little being with a massive voice that just got 150 people screaming." So I think it is about our own willingness to look past our tension and anxiety and just go in there and be like, I admit I'm white. I don't pretend I'm not. Like, I'm going to say some of the wrong things and ask some of the wrong things, but give me a break.
Right.
You know?
Well said. I think breaking down the walls of your own comfort zone too, and making a conscious effort perhaps to where you think it might just bring a level of understanding is something that we can all do just a little bit every day, you know, just to help towards that. Instead of approaching things like it's the unknown, I don't know. We'll break down that wall for yourself and make the effort to get to know that person.
It's a really great point. And just as a kind of a closing thought, everybody, what I would say is, if you feel like, why should I have to do what she's saying? Think of it this way. If you're, and again, on Friday, we're going to talk a little about the generational thing, because I think younger people have a somewhat different experience with this. And certainly, you know, I talk to younger and older, Black and white people, and I get that the younger generation in general has a much more organic way of dealing with interracial issues, with male-female issues, the way they grew up and all that. But if you're over the age of 40 and you're Black, your entire experience was pretty much defined culturally by white America. Think about, you didn't see Black people on television in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, a couple, Sanford and Sons, then, you know, Jefferson. But I mean, you know, most television, it was, you knew what white culture was. You were all about white culture. So when we turn that corner around and go, why not try to understand where Black people are coming from? They've spent a lifetime watching where we came from, because that's how our entertainment and media created it. So it's okay to go, you know what, maybe I need to understand what it's like to walk in your shoes for a minute. And, you know, it's okay. I'm not going to lose any of my power or who I am by doing that. None of us lose by trying to understand where another human being is coming from.
I think
and that goes both ways.
I think you gain when you take the time to get to know someone else's perspective, and what you can teach your kids with just one lens. There's so much to gain.
Right. So thanks for the comment. Appreciate it. The comments.
Thank you.
So everybody, on that note, just keep that in mind. And this is not, you know, again, it goes all the way around. You know, you gain when you sort of try to understand where someone else is coming from in their life. And that said, you can still hold on to who you are, and you don't have to capitulate. If you're well-intentioned and you're trying to figure it out, hold your ground. You don't have to say, you know what, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. You can say, wait, why shouldn't I have said that? Because here's what I meant. You know, we're censoring people's attempts to think and try to do and say the right thing or have a dialogue will never get us there. So on the other side of the equation, we're going to have to create the room for people to try to grow and understand. But the people who are resisting, like if you're in the group of sort of the white, I don't want to understand why, you have to make the effort at the same time to go, how can I see what I'm not seeing? That's what it takes. That's when the coming together and unity is. It's not all or nothing. Again, that's the cultural war that will just rip us to shreds. And if we want that, if you want that divide, well, you're screwing your future and your kids' future and your grandkids' future. Nobody's going to win in that environment. There will ultimately be no winner. The pendulum will just keep swinging back and forth. So let's see if we can take this as kind of what's happened as a chance to find unity and grow. And yes, make some changes we need to take. We all could benefit from looking past our own experience. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live.